Every year, Americans over 60 fill millions of prescriptions for the same calcium pill. The same advice, the same single nutrient solution wrapped in the authority of a white coat and the confidence of a half-century-old assumption. And every year, hip fracture rates remain stubbornly, heartbreakingly high. More than 300,000 Americans over 65 are hospitalized for hip fractures annually. Many never fully recover. The conventional approach is not failing by accident. It is failing because it was built on an incomplete picture, one nutrient, one mechanism, one pharmaceutical pathway, while the rest of the biology goes unaddressed. But here is what the research is now confirming. What traditional healing systems have always known, and what this video is going to show you: bone is not built by calcium alone. It is built by an ecosystem of compounds, working together: vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, amino acids, anti-inflammatory signals, and the plants that deliver that ecosystem have been growing in gardens, along roadsides, and in kitchen windowsills for thousands of years. Today we are going through 12 of them, 12 plants with specific named compounds, clinical evidence in several cases, and cross-cultural histories stretching back to ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, the Levant, and the courts of Chinese emperors. And pay close attention to number 1. Most people walk past it without a second glance every single day, and the research on what it does for bone density is genuinely surprising. Somewhere in the middle of this list, we are also going to look at a moment in Scripture that reads on the surface like a story of divine intervention. But when you examine it through the lens of what we now know about cellular restoration, it tells a very different and deeply scientific story. Stay with us. Plant number 12. Horsetail, the ancient fern that silicifies bone. Horsetail Equisetum arvense is not a flowering plant. It is not even a relatively modern species. Horsetail is a living fossil, a direct descendant of the towering tree ferns that dominated the Carboniferous period over 300 million years ago. The ancient Greeks called it Hipporus, horse's tail, and Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century, described it as a wound-closing, tissue-building herb useful wherever the body needed to harden and hold together. Roman military physicians carried it in their kits. The same plant was independently used in traditional Chinese medicine as a tonic for bone and joint strength, and in the traditional healing systems of indigenous North Americans for kidney complaints and wound management. 3 completely separate healing traditions. 1 plant. 1 underlying pattern of use: structural support tissue, integrity hardening. Modern science found the mechanism. Horsetail contains the highest concentration of bioavailable silica of any plant on Earth. Between 5 and 8% of its dry weight is silicon dioxide. Silica is the mineral required for the mineralization of bone collagen. Think of bone as a construction project. Collagen is the scaffolding, and silica is the material that cements the scaffolding into a rigid, load-bearing structure. Without adequate silica, collagen mineralizes incompletely. The bone remains structurally vulnerable even when calcium levels are normal. A 2021 review in the journal Biological Trace Element Research confirmed that silicon supplementation increases bone mineral density and collagen cross-linking in both animal and human studies, with researchers calling for expanded investigation into silicon as a therapeutic nutrient. For osteoporosis, horsetail tea is the preparation with the longest documented use. Steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried horsetail in near boiling water. The water should be just off the boil, around 190 degrees Fahrenheit, for 15 to 20 minutes. The long steep is essential because silica requires time and heat to extract fully from the plant material. The resulting tea has a faintly mineral, slightly grassy flavor. Drink 1 cup daily. One important note: use only Equisetum arvense, the common horsetail. Several related species contain thiaminase, an enzyme that degrades B vitamins. Equisetum arvense does not. If you are purchasing a commercial preparation, verify the species designation on the label. Long-term daily use of very high doses is not recommended for individuals with kidney conditions. The Romans did not know what silica was. They knew that something in this plant helped wounds close cleanly and tissue hold firm. The research is now giving that knowledge its chemical name. Plant number 11. Sesame seeds, the most calcium-dense food no one counts. The book of Exodus describes the manna that sustained the Israelites in the wilderness, and in the Talmudic commentary tradition, several rabbinical sources connect the color and taste of manna to coriander seed and sesame small seeds that formed the foundation of ancient Near Eastern nutrition. Sesame, Sesamum indicum, is one of the oldest cultivated oil crops in human history. Excavations at sites in the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley, dating to 2,000, 500 BCE, confirms sesame cultivation. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri list sesame as a medicinal ingredient. The Assyrians recorded a myth in which the gods drank sesame wine before creating the earth. In traditional Ayurvedic medicine, sesame was prescribed specifically for bone strengthening. The Sanskrit texts refer to it as one of the primary foods for building the dhatus, the bodily tissues, of which bone is the densest and most enduring. East Asian traditional medicine systems use sesame oil as a medium for delivering minerals to aging joints. Again, independent civilizations arriving at the same nutritional conclusion. The reason is remarkable. 1 tablespoon of whole, unhulled sesame seeds contains approximately 88 milligrams of calcium, comparable to a third of a glass of milk in a tablespoon. 100 grams of unhulled sesame seeds delivers close to 975 milligrams of calcium by some analyses. But the form matters enormously. Hulled sesame seeds, the pale white kind most commonly sold in grocery stores, lose the outer hull, where much of the calcium and magnesium are concentrated. Unhulled sesame seeds retain the full mineral profile. Tahini made from unhulled sesame is darker, more bitter, more complex in flavor, and measurably more nutritious for bone health. Sesame also provides magnesium, zinc, phosphorus, and copper, along with 2 unique lignans, sesamin and sesamolin, that have demonstrated antioxidant properties, and in research studies, modest effects on inflammatory pathways associated with bone resorption. Studies also suggest that sesame consumption may support healthy estrogen metabolism in postmenopausal women, a mechanism with direct relevance to bone loss. Use unhulled sesame seeds, toasted dry in a pan until golden and fragrant, then ground with a pestle or in a spice grinder. Sprinkle the ground seeds generously onto salads, grain bowls, and steamed vegetables. Mix tahini made from unhulled sesame into dressings with lemon juice and garlic. The flavor is nuttier and more assertive than the pale commercial version. 4,000 years of tradition had this right. Plant number 10. Rosemary, the monastery herb that protects the scaffold of bone. Medieval monastery gardens across Europe kept rosemary as a matter of near universal practice. The Benedictine monks of Monte Cassino cultivated it against the southern walls, where the stone held warmth through the night. Hildegard von Bingen, the 12th century abbess and medical writer, described rosemary as strengthening to the nerves and bones. She prescribed it specifically for the elderly, noting that those whose joints had become stiff and fragile benefited from its warming and binding properties. The same herb was documented in Ayurvedic texts as a fire plant associated with both inflammation reduction and structural strengthening. Ancient Egyptian herbalists used rosemary in preparations for joint pain. The pattern of convergence is there again. The mechanism that has interested modern researchers centers on carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid, 2 polyphenol compounds unique to the rosemary plant. A 2023 study published in Nutrients found that rosmarinic acid suppressed the activity of rankle, a cytokine that is one of the primary signals activating osteoclasts, the cells that break bone down. The same study found that carnosic acid enhanced the differentiation of osteoblasts. In other words, rosemary's 2 primary compounds were working simultaneously on both sides of the bone remodeling equation, slowing destruction and stimulating construction. A separate line of research has found that ursolic acid, also present in rosemary, promotes muscle protein synthesis, and maintaining muscle mass in older adults is now understood to be directly correlated with maintaining bone density, since muscular contraction provides the mechanical stress that stimulates osteoblast activity. Rosemary is most effective when used generously in cooked food, rather than as a light garnish. Steep 2 fresh sprigs in warm olive oil for 15 minutes over low heat, then use that infused oil to roast vegetables, dress grain dishes, or drizzle over legume soups. The fat in the olive oil extracts the fat-soluble polyphenols from the rosemary, making them available for absorption. Alternatively, steep dried rosemary leaves in just boiled water for 10 minutes and drink as a tea, less dramatic in flavor than the oil preparation, but meaningful as a daily mineral source. The monks of the Middle Ages, who kept rosemary in every healing garden, were not working from intuition alone. They were working from generations of observation. The pharmacology is now beginning to explain what they saw. Plant number 9. Parsley, the most nutritionally dense herb you are treating as a garnish. Hippocrates himself in the 5th century BCE prescribed parsley specifically for kidney complaints and for bone pain in elderly patients. He understood through observation rather than molecular analysis, that this plant did something structural. It was not decorative medicine. It was functional medicine embedded in a sprig, most people today drop directly into the trash after it comes off the plate. Traditional medicine systems from Persia, from ancient Rome, from medieval Northern Europe, all separately recognized parsley as a medicinal plant with skeletal relevance. The Persian physician Ibn Sina, writing in the 11th century, recommended parsley for strengthening bones and alleviating joint pain. Roman legionnaires carried dried parsley as a field ration, not just for flavor, but because campaign physicians had observed that soldiers who consumed it regularly maintained their physical integrity better through long marches. 1/2 cup of fresh parsley provides over 550% of the daily recommended value for vitamin K, more vitamin K per gram than kale, more than collard greens, more than virtually any other food in the standard American diet. Vitamin K activates osteocalcin, a bone matrix protein that acts as the binding agent anchoring calcium inside bone tissue. Without sufficient vitamin K, calcium circulates in the bloodstream unanchored, potentially depositing in arteries rather than bone. This is why calcium supplementation in the absence of adequate vitamin K has been associated in some studies with cardiovascular risk rather than bone benefit. The calcium has no address. Parsley helps give it one. Parsley also provides approximately 83 milligrams of calcium per 1/2 cup of fresh herb, alongside meaningful vitamin C for collagen synthesis, and 2 compounds, apigenin and miracetin, that have demonstrated in laboratory studies both pro-osteoblast and anti-osteoclast properties at the cellular level. The key is quantity. A sprig contains almost nothing therapeutically meaningful. A generous 1/2 cup, roughly a full loose handful chopped into tabula, stirred into a grain bowl, or blended into a morning smoothie, delivers the concentrations the research measured. Make tabula the traditional way, enormous quantities of fresh parsley as the primary ingredient, not an accent. Blend a full cup into a fruit smoothie. It disappears into the flavor entirely while contributing its complete mineral profile. Grow it in a pot on your kitchen windowsill. A single parsley plant provides continuous harvests for an entire growing season. 3,000 years of medicinal use is embedded in an herb most people treat as decoration. That ends today. Plant number 8. Spinach. The bone plant that requires an honest conversation. Spinach appears in the records of ancient Persia as a cultivated food plant by at least the 4th century CE, from which it traveled to China via the Silk Road Tang dynasty. Records call it the herb of Persia, and later to Europe through the Arab agricultural revolution of the medieval period. Medieval European physicians ranked it among the most nourishing plants available, and it was cultivated in monastery kitchen gardens specifically for convalescents recovering from illness or injury. That instinct was not wrong. The problem is more specific than most mainstream nutrition sources are willing to say. Spinach is extraordinarily high in calcium, approximately 245 milligrams per cooked cup. It is also extraordinarily high in oxalic acid, which binds to that calcium in the gut and forms insoluble calcium oxalate that the human digestive system cannot efficiently break down. Research estimates that only approximately 5% of the calcium in spinach is bioavailable. That reduces the effective calcium delivery from that full cup to something closer to 12 milligrams, roughly equivalent to a teaspoon of milk. Eating spinach for calcium is significantly less efficient than eating kale or collard greens. So why is spinach on this list? Because bone health is not only about calcium. Spinach delivers over 1,000% of the daily value for vitamin K per cooked cup. It is rich in magnesium, one of the most chronically deficient minerals in the American diet, and a mineral with a direct structural role in activating vitamin D, regulating calcium transport between blood and bone, and supporting osteoblast function. Spinach also contains lutein, an antioxidant that recent research has associated with reduced markers of bone resorption in older adults. A connection still being investigated, but consistent enough across multiple observational studies to be worth noting. Its anti-inflammatory profile is substantial. Use spinach intentionally, not as your primary calcium source, but as your vitamin K magnesium, an anti-inflammatory delivery system alongside kale and collard greens that provide calcium you can actually absorb. One additional note, spinach oxalates can bind dietary calcium from other foods consumed at the same meal. Be strategic. Eat your high calcium foods in meals that do not also contain large amounts of raw spinach. Plant number 7. Bok choy, the complete cruciferous bone builder. The oldest recorded cultivation of bok choy dates to 5th century China, where it was documented in agricultural texts as one of the primary vegetables of the northern provinces. It appears in the dietary prescriptions of traditional Chinese medicine as a cooling, mineralizing food, particularly recommended for the elderly, and for those recovering from illness, the same demographic for whom bone preservation is most urgent. Chinese herbalists, working centuries before modern endocrinology, understood through clinical observation that something in this plant supported the body's structural maintenance. Bok choy is cruciferous and very low in oxalates, which means its calcium is genuinely bioavailable. 1 cup of cooked bok choy provides approximately 160 milligrams of calcium at a high absorption rate. It also delivers vitamin K, vitamin C, for collagen synthesis, magnesium, phosphorus, and selenium. What distinguishes bok choy from a nutritional strategy perspective is its ratio of bone protective compounds to calories. Bok choy contains roughly 9 calories per cup, raw nearly weightless in caloric terms, while delivering that full mineral and vitamin profile. For older adults managing weight alongside bone health, this ratio is extraordinarily favorable. High nutrient density, negligible caloric cost. The cruciferous compounds in bok choy have been studied for their effects on estrogen metabolism. Bok choy contains indole, 3-carbinol, and di-indolyl methane compounds that support healthy estrogen metabolism pathways. In postmenopausal women, where declining estrogen is one of the primary drivers of accelerated bone loss, foods that support healthy estrogen metabolism may provide an additional layer of bone protection beyond direct mineral delivery. This hormonal dimension is rarely discussed in bone health content, but the research connecting cruciferous vegetable consumption to bone density in postmenopausal women is consistent enough across epidemiological studies to deserve mention. Cook bok choy quickly 2 to 3 minutes in a hot pan with sesame oil and garlic, enough to soften the stems without degrading the cruciferous compounds. Overcooking is the primary nutritional error with this vegetable. Plant number 6. Collard greens, the calcium king that Southern cuisine always knew. Collard greens have been cultivated since ancient Greece. The earliest written references appear in texts from roughly 400 BCE, where they were described as a staple food for working people and a restorative for the elderly. They traveled to the American South through multiple routes, arriving with African enslaved people who recognized in them a plant closely related to the leafy greens of their home regions and preserved their traditional preparation methods across centuries of displacement. That slow-cooked pot of collard greens with aromatics that became foundational to Southern American food culture was not merely culinary tradition. It was the continuation of an ancient nutritional intelligence under extraordinary historical pressure. 1 cup of cooked collard greens provides approximately 270 milligrams of calcium, comparable to 8 ounces of Greek yogurt and more than kale mustard greens or any other commonly available leafy vegetable. It also delivers close to 800 micrograms of vitamin K, well over 800% of the daily recommended value. In a single vegetable, 2 of the most critical nutrients for bone mineralization arrive in extraordinary quantities. Like kale, collard greens are low enough in oxalates that their calcium is genuinely bioavailable. And because they are cruciferous, they carry the same sulforaphane compounds shown to suppress the inflammatory signaling that activates osteoclast activity over time. Traditional long cooking, braised for 45 minutes to an hour, with aromatics, breaks down tough cell walls and makes nutrients more accessible, though it reduces raw vitamin K content somewhat. Lightly steamed or quickly sautéed collards retain more vitamin K. Both methods are nutritionally valid and represent different trades between texture and nutrient retention. The best preparation is the one you will actually return to consistently. Collard greens grow vigorously in American gardens, from spring through fall in most zones, and through winter in zones 7 and above. They are cold hardy, and crucially improve in flavor. After a frost, the cold converts some of their starches to sugar, mellowing the bitterness that some people find in summer leaves. A 12-inch container can sustain a productive collard plant through most of the growing season. If you grow your own, you control freshness, supply, and cost. Plant number 5. Astragalus, the Chinese imperial tonic that bone research is rediscovering. This is the entry most people have never encountered. Astragalus membranaceus, known in traditional Chinese medicine as huangqi, meaning yellow leader, has been documented in Chinese medical texts for over 2,000 years. The earliest comprehensive reference appears in the Shenong Benchao Jing, the Divine Farmer's Materia Medica, compiled around 200 CE, but based on oral traditions reaching back further. It was prescribed for rebuilding the body's foundational strength after illness injury, or aging, what Chinese medicine called tonifying the wei qi, the body's protective and structural energy. Imperial physicians administered it to elderly members of the court, specifically to maintain physical integrity and resilience. Astragalus traveled the Silk Road and appears in Arabic medical texts of the medieval period, where it was recorded as a plant that strengthened the body's foundation. Its independent recognition across East Asian and Middle Eastern healing traditions follows the convergence pattern that appears throughout this list. Where multiple ancient civilizations reach the same conclusion about a plant, there is usually a compound responsible. In the case of astragalus and bone, the compound of primary interest to researchers: nutrition, telomere preservation. Telomeres are the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes that shorten with each cell division, marking biological aging. Osteoblasts, like all cells, lose regenerative capacity as their telomeres shorten. Cycloestrogenol has been shown in laboratory studies to activate telomerase, the enzyme responsible for maintaining telomere length. A 2020 study in phytomedicine found that astragalus polysaccharides enhanced osteoblast proliferation and suppressed osteoclast differentiation through multiple signaling pathways, with researchers describing the findings as consistent with therapeutic potential for osteoporosis. A separate line of research has found that astragalus polysaccharides support the gut microbiome in ways that enhance mineral absorption, an indirect but meaningful contribution to bone health. Astragalus root is available dried in slices at Asian grocery stores and health food stores. The traditional preparation is a long, slow decoction, 3 to 4 dried root slices, simmered in 4 cups of water for 45 minutes to an hour, then strained and drunk as a warming, mildly sweet broth. It can be added to soups and bone broths during long cooking and removed before serving. Do not take astragalus if you are on immunosuppressive medications, as it has documented immune-modulating effects. 2,000 years of traditional use does not make a remedy appropriate for every person. Consult your physician if you are managing an autoimmune condition. Plant number 4. Kale, the most bioavailable calcium of any leafy green. Kale appears in ancient Roman agricultural writing. Pliny the Elder documented it in his Naturalis Historia of 77 CE as a common food of Roman peasants and soldiers, valued for its hardiness and sustaining properties. Roman military physicians recommended it during long campaigns precisely because it maintained the physical strength of soldiers over extended periods of deprivation. Ancient Greek physicians listed it among the foods prescribed for the elderly. The Celtic peoples of northern Europe cultivated forms of kale through the Iron Age, and medieval European monasteries grew it as a winter staple through seasons when other vegetables failed. This is not a modern superfood discovery. This is a plant with 2,000 years of documented human experience behind it. There is a fundamental problem with how most people think about plant-based calcium, and kale exposes it clearly. Many plants contain calcium, but calcium bound to oxalic acid, the compound found at high concentrations in spinach, Swiss chard, and beet greens, cannot be absorbed efficiently. Research estimates that only about 5% of the calcium in spinach is absorbed. Kale, by contrast, is very low in oxalates. Studies have found that kale's calcium absorption rate is approximately 40%, comparable to dairy milk, and far higher than most plant sources. 1 cup of cooked kale provides approximately 177 milligrams of calcium at that high absorption rate, alongside over 1,000% of the daily recommended value for vitamin K1. Kale also supplies vitamin C for collagen formation, magnesium for calcium metabolism, and manganese, which supports the enzyme activity involved in bone mineralization. The cruciferous compounds in kale, the sulforaphane family also found in broccoli and cabbage, have documented anti-inflammatory effects that suppress the inflammatory cascade involved in accelerated bone loss. A diet consistently high in cruciferous vegetables has been associated in epidemiological studies with higher bone density and lower fracture risk in older adults. Lightly cooking kale, steaming, sautéing, or blanching breaks down cell walls and improves nutrient access without significantly reducing mineral content. Massaged raw kale salads, lightly wilted in a warm pan with olive oil and garlic, added to soups and stews in the final minutes of cooking, or blended into smoothies. Kale works in almost any format. Grow it in your garden year-round in most American climates. It is cold-hardy, productive, and willing to survive conditions that would end most other vegetables. If you are finding this useful, if this is giving you information your doctor never took the time to share, hit the like button right now. That one action tells YouTube this content is worth putting in front of other people over 60 who are dealing with the same concern. And drop a comment: which of these plants are you already using and which one surprised you most? I read every comment and I will respond. Let's keep going. Plant number 3. Turmeric, the anti-inflammatory that protects the cells that build your bones. In the book of Exodus, when the Israelites are given detailed instructions for the construction of the tabernacle and the preparation of sacred anointing oil, The spice list includes a compound scholars translate variously as sweet cane, calamus, or aromatic reed, and several botanical historians have argued that the anointing traditions of the ancient Near East drew from the same spice trade that brought turmeric west from India through the Persian Gulf routes. Whether turmeric itself appears in biblical text is debated. What is not debated is its central role in the Ayurvedic medical tradition that stretches back over 4,000 years, where it was called Haridra, the Golden One, and prescribed specifically for bone and joint disorders, inflammatory conditions, and the preservation of physical integrity into old age. The ancient Romans encountered turmeric through trade and used it as a dye and as a digestive aid. Traditional Chinese medicine incorporated it by the 7th century CE, where it was prescribed for pain and for conditions affecting the structural integrity of joints and limbs. The pattern of independent civilizations reaching the same therapeutic conclusion is as clear with turmeric as with any plant in this list. Turmeric does not build bone the way calcium builds bone. It does something that may matter more for people over 60. It protects the cells that build bone from being overwhelmed by the cells that destroy it. In healthy bone metabolism, osteoblasts and osteoclasts work in balance. In aging bodies, particularly in the presence of chronic low-grade inflammation, osteoclast activity accelerates. The inflammatory signaling compounds that drive this process are the same ones that turmeric's active compound curcumin has been shown to suppress. A 2024 review published in Frontiers in Pharmacology found that curcumin positively regulates osteoblast differentiation and promotes osteoblast proliferation through multiple signaling pathways, telling bone-building cells to multiply and get to work, while simultaneously suppressing the signals that activate bone-destroying cells. A separate 2024 meta-analysis of 11 randomized controlled trials confirmed curcumin's effectiveness for reducing pain and improving joint mobility in osteoarthritis patients, the same inflammatory joint disease that frequently accompanies osteoporosis in older adults. The challenge with turmeric is absorption. Curcumin is poorly absorbed on its own. The single most effective way to dramatically increase its bioavailability is to combine it with black pepper, specifically the compound piperine, which published research suggests may increase curcumin absorption significantly. The traditional Indian practice of cooking turmeric with black pepper in fat-based dishes turns out to be biochemically optimal wisdom embedded in cuisine long before the mechanism was understood. Use turmeric in cooking. Make golden milk with a teaspoon of turmeric in warm plant or dairy milk with a pinch of black pepper and a small amount of fat, and always pair it with pepper. Plant number 2. Stinging nettle, the roadside plant that outperforms most supplements. The prophet Elijah, in 1 Kings chapter 19, fled alone into the wilderness of the Negev. He sat under a broom tree, exhausted beyond recovery, and asked to die. He had walked 40 days. He had eaten almost nothing. His electrolytes were depleted, his muscles were failing, and his bones had been subjected to extraordinary mechanical stress without nutritional replenishment. He fell into a sleep that looked like surrender, and twice Scripture records an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." What was provided was specifically a cake baked on hot coals, grain minerals, carbohydrates, and a jar of water. That isn't simply a story of divine intervention. That is a description of emergency cellular restoration. Depleted glycogen replenished. Electrolyte balance partially restored. The physiological collapse of extended fasting and extreme physical exertion addressed by the most fundamental nutritional provision available. Elijah arose, and the text says that on the strength of that food alone, he walked 40 more days to Horeb. The plants growing along the desert margins, where Elijah traveled, the plants that formed the foundation of the wilderness diet that sustained him, included members of the nettle family plants that have been foraged, cooked, and consumed for their mineral density by desert-dwelling peoples for millennia. Stinging nettle Urtica dioica is one of the most complete bone-building plants in existence. 100 grams of fresh nettle leaf provides 416% of the daily recommended intake for vitamin K. It provides calcium, magnesium, iron silicon, silica, potassium, manganese, zinc, copper, chromium, vitamin C, and B complex. Research published in Food Science and Nutrition confirmed that nettle flour delivers significant bone-fortifying calcium and magnesium alongside vitamins D and K that help bones actually use that calcium. The silica content is particularly notable. Silica is required for the mineralization of bone collagen, the process by which the protein scaffolding of bone hardens into the dense weight-bearing tissue it needs to be. Laboratory research has found that nettle extract increases the number of osteoblasts in bone tissue, reduces local inflammation, and in animal studies, maintained calcium and phosphorus levels comparable to hormone replacement therapy without the hormonal side effects. Once dried or cooked, nettle loses its sting entirely. Nettle tea is the most accessible preparation. Pour just boiled water over 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried nettle leaf. Steep for 15 to 20 minutes. The longer steep extracts more minerals, and drink 1 to 2 cups daily. Blanched, fresh spring nettles, handled with gloves until cooked, can be used exactly like cooked spinach in any recipe. Nettle soup has been eaten across northern and eastern Europe for centuries. The flavor is mild green and deeply nourishing. The angel told Elijah to arise and eat. The plants along the way were already there waiting. Plant number 1. Moringa, the tree of life that feeds bone at every level. This is the one most people have walked past without recognition. It grows along roadsides in tropical and subtropical climates. It has been cultivated in India, Pakistan, and sub-Saharan Africa for centuries. Mothers fed its leaves to nursing children. Traditional healers prescribed its pods for joint and bone disorders long before any laboratory confirmed what they already knew. It has been called the tree of life, and the name turns out to be in nutritional terms remarkably accurate. The moringa tree, Moringa oleifera, appears as a likely candidate in several ancient identification debates. The plant called Tisaft Safa, in certain Hebrew texts, associated with the wilderness and the mystery shrub under which Elijah rested in the Negev, have both been proposed by botanists as possibly moringa-adjacent species. What is documented with certainty is that moringa was known in ancient Egypt. Seeds have been found in Egyptian archaeological sites, and that it was traded along the same routes that connected the biblical world from very early in recorded history. Roman legionnaires used a moringa relative species for skin and wound care. The Mauryan Empire in ancient India cultivated it as a royal medicinal plant. The pattern of independent civilizations recognizing this plant's extraordinary properties spans from Egypt to India to sub-Saharan Africa without any plausible chain of transmission. They found it independently because the plant's benefits are genuinely observable. Gram for gram dried moringa leaves contain roughly 4 times the calcium of whole milk, 3 times the potassium of a banana, and significant levels of phosphorus and magnesium, all foundational to bone mineral density. A 2025 study published in Bioactive Compounds in Health and Disease examined the effect of moringa pod extract on osteoblast cells and found that the extract significantly increased calcium production in bone-building cells while simultaneously reducing inflammatory compounds that drive bone breakdown. Researchers describe the findings as evidence of moringa's potential as a therapeutic agent for maintaining bone homeostasis. But what separates moringa from every other calcium-rich plant in this video is the completeness of its bone health profile. Moringa contains boron, a trace mineral most bone health conversations skip entirely. Boron stabilizes and extends the active life of vitamin D in the body. Without adequate boron, vitamin D degrades faster, calcium absorption falls, and the entire chain of bone-building chemistry weakens. Moringa supplies vitamin C for collagen synthesis. It delivers the calcium, the cofactors to activate the calcium, the structural proteins to scaffold the bone, and the anti-inflammatory compounds to protect the building process. Almost nothing else on Earth does all of this in a single leaf. Dried moringa powder, 1 teaspoon, stirred into a morning smoothie, mixed into warm broth, or combined with yogurt, is the most accessible and potent form. The powder has a mild, slightly earthy flavor that disappears entirely when combined with fruit. Fresh leaves available, if you grow moringa in zones 9 and above, can be sautéed like spinach, or added raw to salads. One note of caution: moringa seeds and root extracts are different from the leaves and pods, and should not be consumed in large quantities without guidance. The leaf and pod forms are the safe, nutritionally verified options discussed here. If you are on blood pressure or thyroid medication, speak with your physician before adding significant amounts. Moringa has documented effects on both that may interact with those medications. The tree of life. The traditional healers who gave it that name were not speaking metaphorically about a general wellness tonic. They were describing a plant that addresses the body's most fundamental structural maintenance, from the proteins that hold bone together to the minerals that fill it to the biological signals that preserve the balance between building and breakdown. 4,000 years of observation. The science is now confirming the mechanism. Here is the principle that runs through every plant in this video, and it is the principle that most of the supplement industry is built to obscure. The compounds that build and protect bone do not work in isolation. They work as a system. Calcium without vitamin K has no address. vitamin K without magnesium cannot activate the enzymes it needs. Magnesium without adequate vitamin D cannot regulate calcium transport effectively. Vitamin D without boron degrades too quickly to sustain calcium absorption. Collagen without vitamin C cannot be synthesized. All of it, every link in that biological chain, depends on a consistent, diverse, whole plant dietary pattern in which these compounds arrive together in the forms and ratios that human physiology evolved to recognize. The supplement industry sells you one piece of this chain at a time: a calcium pill, a vitamin D capsule, a magnesium tablet, each sold separately, each stripped of the cofactors that allow it to function. And the processing that separates these compounds from their natural context is not a minor technical detail. It is the difference between a nutrient the body knows how to use and an isolated molecule it is not entirely sure what to do with. What these 12 plants represent is the complete chain. Not any single link, but the full ecosystem of bone-supporting compounds that traditional healing systems in India, in China, in Egypt, in the biblical Near East, in medieval Europe, independently recognized and preserved in their food cultures over thousands of years. Modern nutritional science is now piece by piece discovering why. The Negev desert plants that nourished Elijah on the edge of survival, the monastery gardens of medieval Europe, the Ayurvedic formulas of the Mauryan court, they were all solving the same biological problem with the same plants across thousands of years and thousands of miles. The question worth sitting with after this video is not which supplement to add to your shelf. It is what your plate looks like every week, and whether the living food on it is doing the complete work your bones need. If this video gave you something your doctor never mentioned, hit the like button. That single action puts this information in front of more people who need it. Subscribe to this channel, because we go deeper into ancient plant wisdom and the nutritional science that explains it every single week, and this depth of content is free and will remain free. Share this with someone over 60 in your life who is managing bone loss and has never heard that 4 prunes a day, a handful of parsley, and a teaspoon of moringa powder might be part of the answer. You do not need to say anything. Just send them the link. Drop your most important question in the comments. What plant, what condition, what ancient tradition do you want this channel to go deeper on next? Your questions shape what we make. I will see you in the next one.